There's a pattern I've seen among Splatoon players that's very thoroughly explained by a concept in psychology called cognitive dissonance. We'll talk about what that means in a second, but let's set the scene first. You've got, let's say, a frontliner who takes a fight where they're isolated and loses it. If it's a fight they called or a push they'd talked about as a team and they had reason to expect you'd be there fighting it with them, that would be one thing. But this time, it was a situation where you couldn't possibly have been there to help them. You were just coming off respawn, or another enemy player was preventing you from reaching the fight. Even so, they double down and argue that you could have helped. They'll argue on the basis that the team needs to play faster and take fights together. Something you can agree with on paper, but that just doesn't seem like a valid criticism of this particular situation. That used to be me. Maybe it still is to a lesser degree. I don't know. I've been out of the game for a while. It got to a point, though, where I was so convinced, and I couldn't be argued out of it by my teammates, that it came to a head in a meeting with a coach. That coach told me in a very firm voice, "You are making it very difficult for your team to win this game." Something I haven't forgotten because I'm very thankful for him having said that. It was very carefully worded, but it needed to be a bit forceful from someone whose opinion I trusted to punch through such an ingrained personal bias I had. My story isn't the only such story in all of competitive Splatoon, not by a long shot. I've seen it in other teammates, in other players, in streamers, in more casual players. It's a very easy mental trap to fall into. To explain why, let's talk about that term cognitive dissonance now. Cognitive refers to thinking, and dissonance is a music term for two notes that clash, that sound bad when they're played together. Put together, it's when there's a mental clash, a contradiction, between things that we believe and things that we do. Everyone's going to experience cognitive dissonance from time to time. What's really important isn't the clash itself, but what we do to resolve it. What people would like to think they always do is realizing that they're not acting in accordance with themselves and exercising self-control. A kid starts to take a cookie from the jar, but then remembers their mom told them no more cookies today and decides not to. Their behavior, grabbing cookies, didn't match their beliefs about what was right for them to do, so they changed their behavior. The scary thing that a lot of people don't realize is that it is a lot more common for people to resolve cognitive dissonance the opposite way. They don't tend to change their behavior to match their beliefs. They tend to change their beliefs so that their beliefs now justify them continuing their behavior. Maybe the child decides, no more cookies was a rule for yesterday. She didn't say that today, so I can have cookies. Now, if that same child were to instead witness their little sibling trying to take more cookies, they might come to a completely different conclusion. Because their behavior doesn't enter into the question anymore, they don't have cognitive dissonance to resolve. They can just think straight about the question and realize that the way the rules are made in the house, the most reasonable interpretation of them, is that their sibling should not be taking more cookies. To make this into dating advice and keep our meme going, studies have found that friends of a romantic couple tend to be better at predicting relationship success than the couple itself. I think this helps explain the results of the study pretty handily. Nobody wants to have to break up with someone. It's not a fun thing to do. The couple doesn't want to have to do the psychologically difficult thing, breaking up. When cognitive dissonance occurs between their decision to stay in the relationship and the belief that the relationship won't last, it's easier for them to change their belief. They decide the relationship is going better than it is, and just keep going. With friends, though, their behavior isn't at stake, so their beliefs are less likely to be warped. The study notes that friends overall had more negative perceptions of a relationship than the couple did. And while that, I think, does have multiple explanations, it is still consistent with this idea. Acknowledging that we need to be better, that we need to change our behavior, is hard. It's something nobody wants to have to do. That creates a perverse incentive psychologically. What's easier isn't to learn, to grow, to be a better person, to bring our actions more in alignment with our beliefs. What's easier is to find an excuse that justifies how we've been acting, so we aren't bothered by the cognitive dissonance anymore. If we get splatted pushing and our team loses the game, the easier thing to think is that our team should have followed up with us, not that we ran in alone. If we think running in alone was what gave the enemy team that push, but we did it anyway, that would mean we have to reflect and admit we were wrong and work to do better. That's a harder thing to do psychologically. But if we choose to think that our fight was good and our team just didn't follow up on it, that's easier for us. This often leads to confirmation bias in our thinking. That is, it causes us to only look for information that validates our preferred conclusion. We made that player turn away from our teammate. It would have been easy to shoot them. They just didn't get there fast enough. That's why we've been working on movement drills, so people can get into fights faster. Someone whose behavior isn't in question here would immediately think to just watch the replay back and see where the teammate was and why they didn't get to the fight in time. The player arguing, though, will subconsciously avoid doing that, because it's easier if everyone just accepts their own conclusion, instead of maybe having to confront evidence they're wrong. They won't realize they're doing this spelled out like that, but on some level, that's what their mind is doing to try and protect them from that embarrassment, that shame, that effort they need to put in. This is why one of the very first videos on the channel, How to Get Out of C Rank, starts with the point that getting better at the game is going to require humility. Without humility, it's too easy for our biases to go unchallenged and for our own brains to get ourselves stuck because they're trying to protect us from the truth. Taken to extremes, this psychological trap can go to some very bizarre places. You'll see people claiming that they were playing better than their teammates, even though their teammates all had much better KD ratios. It is then that the player will claim that KD ratios don't mean everything. You need to understand the game in a more nuanced way. KD isn't the whole measure of a player's impact. In future games, though, they'll look at a teammate's poor KD ratio and cite that as the reason they lost. The same belief is changing multiple times just to justify the player not having to feel like they were wrong on either occasion. When this happens often enough, it seriously impacts a player's ability to analyze the game. There are so many conflicting beliefs they're going to hold, all based on different excuses they made to wriggle out of honest self-reflection, that it's hard to really apply anything they try to teach you. They end up being the only people who can interpret their theory of the game. Of course, they'll have a theory of the game that they try to teach people. To decide they don't know enough to come up with such a theory would be by definition humble. No one, no matter how hard they try to learn this theory, will consistently be able to predict that kind of teacher's analysis of a given situation without having heard that teacher's own take on it first. That kind of teacher may get things right here or there, and there may well be things to learn from them on occasion, but ultimately, theories that predict outcomes more precisely will exist from more disciplined, rational thinkers. Have I been such a teacher? Am I such a teacher? I think about that a lot. I've always said it takes a little bit of arrogance to be a teacher. You have to decide you know something better than someone else does. Assert yourself on the situation. Hopefully, at some point, there's some rational defense for that assertion. Maybe having specific experience your students don't. But then, is that rational defense something anyone would make? Or is it made as an excuse to resolve cognitive dissonance? That's something that's hard to know just from self-reflection alone. Even so, I hope that it will inspire some people to self-reflect in ways they haven't, or maybe for those around them to find the words to confront the wayward thinking of their friend or their teammate, the way that my coach once did. If someone on your team made a point of sending you a link to this video, hey, I've been there. But try to resist the urge to fight it and hear them out. Once you're done hearing them out, sit with it and think on it. You don't owe them a response right away. You may well come away feeling grateful to your teammate for helping you through something that you weren't getting through yourself. That's how it was for me anyway. People are tremendously terrifyingly powerful. I think a lot of the time we get caught up in comparing ourselves to how powerful other people are and considering ourselves to be meek and helpless by contrast. But in absolute terms, everyone is extraordinarily powerful. We have machines that give us leverage, physical and otherwise, that no animal can hope to achieve. A larger animal may be stronger than me by itself, but I can hire someone with money to physically lift and move an entire house intact using technology that I don't even understand myself. We carry a tool in our pockets that within minutes can summon a huge truck for fighting fires with trained operators, or an advanced medical facility on wheels, or armored professional protectors with guns. When we work, when we vote, when we communicate ideas about the world and each other, when we interact with society in any way, we exert a frightening amount of influence on the world around us. I say frighteningly because we are also so vulnerable to tricking ourselves, trapping ourselves, falling prey to squiggly, elusive biases that are hard to pin down even when we're directly looking for them, let alone when we're not aware of them. When our biases guide us, and we wield that immense, in many ways supernatural power, we can make immense supernatural mistakes. Splatoon is a great way to confront these biases because it's much lower stakes. You're not going to get called a bad person for having an unhelpful mindset in a game of Splatoon 3. It's a way that we can play, experiment in a carefree way, which is something that helps people learn more than most other activities. I do also hope, though, for all our sakes, that this kind of lesson is one that we all take outside the game.